Today's video, I want to go ahead and take a little bit of a deeper dive into the shotguns. When I ended up talking about the Gallo the other day, a lot of people were saying, hey, maybe you're sleeping on the JGOD or the Streetsweeper. So I thought I'd dig a little bit deeper, and I came to some conclusions on how you need to use each, because I think the Gallo, the JGOD, and the Streetsweeper are very dominant weapons if you understand how they work. So what I'm going to do in today's video, talk a little bit about the differences, which one's the best for each individual scenario, because unfortunately it's not like one shotgun is the best at everything. We'll go ahead and kind of compare and contrast where they excel, what their drawbacks are, so you know how to make the right decision about what shotgun you want to use in your particular loadout. Obviously, the FFAR is the most dominant weapon currently within Warzone, but as that gets a nerf, hopefully this Thursday, we're going to start to see shotguns slip into the meta, and you're going to want to know which ones you should be using. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, learned something new, please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you're brand new, looking to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. So one of the biggest things that I talked about in my previous video about the Gallo is how important that 3-shot kill potential is, because that's where you are getting a very good TTK. So you kind of just measure out the distance that is likely to happen. When we're using the best optimal class setup, it ends up being that the Streetsweeper has a 3-shot kill right around 6.25 meters, and that is the shortest distance. That's not all that great, but its fire rate does make up for it, and the fact that it is full auto is great for tac sprint users or auto tac sprint users, where you're not getting caught, which is one of the issues that I had with the Gallo. Now that I've kind of switched to more of a auto tac sprint because of the effect that has on your movement. Next up, respectively, is the JGOD at about 8.25 meters. You can get a 3-shot kill, and this fire rate is actually very good, which allows its TTK to be very competitive. Even if you get that 4th shot in, it's very manageable for all of these weapons, but ideally where this thing is going to destroy FFAR users is within this 3-shot kill potential. Then we take it a little bit further. When we get to the Gallo, we're going to end up with about 9.25, which is 1 meter further. Obviously, at the end of the day, these are like 1 meter here, 1 meter there, but that is very important in terms of consistency, because more often than not, maybe you miss a couple pellets here and there, you're likely to get some consistency the longer that range is, because that's just less pellets you need to land. So when we look at the overall TTK, you can see it on screen. We get that 2-shot kill, both under 200 milliseconds. And what that means is pretty much if somebody is within your 2-shot kill range, they're going to be instant deleted, and they will have no clue what happened. It'll feel like they got sniped in a 1-shot headshot. That's how quick the TTK feels at that range. As soon as you drop off to that 3rd shot, you can see that the Streetsweeper, the Gallo, and the JGOD are all relatively close, within about 30 to 40 milliseconds apart, which is a totally negligible difference. You would not be able to feel that difference within game. So now one of the other things that you got to really worry about, what is the biggest difference between these weapons in terms of actually handling, because the Cold War weapons have unique movement ability compared to the Modern Warfare. Normally the Modern Warfare weapons tend to be a little bit slower in terms of movement, as far as lateral movement side to side, which is incredibly important when you're in a gunfight, because if you're strafing pretty fast, you're going to be able to pull that trigger. This is excluding the combat stock, which is pretty nice, but it's going to really destroy your sprint to fire time, which we'll talk about in a quick second. So the main thing here is the overall mobility with the Cold War shotguns. It's 10% better than you're going to be able to get with the JGOD. So the JGOD has a lot less mobility. It's going to feel a lot slower, and that's one of the reasons you don't see a lot of people using it. When it first came out, they used it for like a day, they moved off of it just because the mobility is so bad, especially compared to these Cold War ones. It's very hard for an aggressive player to make that adjustment and want to have a little bit slower mobility, despite the positives with the JGOD being full auto, same thing like the Streetsweeper. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the actual hipfire difference, because it is significant using the ideal builds for all of these weapons. So here's the hipfire spread for each of these weapons. What we're looking at is the tightest hipfire spread is going to be the JGOD, which is 45% better than the Gallo. I zoomed it in quite a bit so you can see that difference. But again, the tightest is generally better, so that when you're on target, if you're going to be more likely to hit the bullet spread. But obviously, if you have bad aim, you might benefit from having a wider spread because you need to be less accurate. But that also means the consistency drops down, because that's less pellets that are likely to hit the target. And shotguns are all based off pellets. You need a certain number of pellets to get max damage for those individual ranges. So obviously the tighter that is, even ADS is going to make that tighter. you're going to end up having that difference there. So overall, in terms of like tight spread, JAK 12 comes really far ahead, and you can kind of see where the Streetsweeper lands. So next thing we'll talk about is sprint to fire time, and I think this is by far one of the most important statistics when it comes to a shotgun, because you are generally going to be running into a room and then you're going to be pulling the trigger. Any delay between you pulling the trigger and the bullets coming out can cost you significantly, because that'll make it so you take more damage. One of the great things when you're comparing these is it's pretty straightforward which one comes out ahead. If we look at the Gallo with the optimum class setup, that we're actually lowering that while also maximizing our range, we're going to end up with a sprint to fire of 200 milliseconds. Same thing for the Streetsweeper. They almost copy and pasted those because obviously they're part of the same engine. But with the JAK 12 being a part of the Modern Warfare engine, it has a few different attachments that the others do not. And this ends up lowering the sprint to fire all the way down to 133 milliseconds, which is a huge difference. This is about 70 milliseconds difference, which can cause you to land an extra shot in there before the other player, and then they end up getting deleted even faster. With that, let's go ahead and jump into a few different class setups for each of these and kind of talk about which areas they excel the most and how you should be using them. So JAK 12 is going to be a very good weapon because of the sprint to fire time. Obviously it has a lower mobility. You don't really need much more than 20 round mag. You can go a little bit slower if you want the 32. Dragon's Breath on this is a gimmick, so I would not use that. Same thing with these frag rounds, unless you're just blowing up vehicles, because they're pretty effective at that. But if we go through here, we're going to use a stippled grip tape. Even though we're not going to be aiming down sight, we don't need aiming stability, so that doesn't matter. But sprint to fire time, that's how we get it that low. Same thing with the 5 milliwatt. It's tightening the Hipfire spread. This is something we've checked out in the past. It tightens it the most, significantly better than whatever else we're going to see. And it will help that sprint to fire time. Obviously, you're going to have a visible laser because it is Modern Warfare and the attachments mostly do what they say they do. You're going to have that green laser visible when in the Hipfire. So if you ADS, it'll disappear, and then you let go and it'll be visible. We're going to go ahead and use this torrent because it's going to give you that maximum range. That's how we're reaching that maximum range. Obviously, you can go with the influx. It's such a negligible difference. It's really a matter of preference on what you want. Obviously, this one has a little bit slower movement speed for a little bit more range, and then this one you can get a little bit more mobility with a little bit less range. 100% up to you. Then we have the Forge Tack Marauder, which is going to help you with the range, pellet spread, as well as staying suppressed, and that's generally the way you want to go for this class setup. And this one's great for actually holding an area, shooting in a doorway, jump in a little bit. It's not going to have the mobility of the Streetsweeper, which is meant a little bit more to close that distance and barrel stuff. Ideally in trios or less. In quads, you're going to end up running into an ammo situation because the reload time is a little bit slower on that thing. Even though it does shells individually, for the Gallo as well, the Gallo is 30% faster in reloading than the Streetsweeper, but it only has 12 rounds, which we'll get to. So this is the class setup for this. Definitely built as an all-around jack of all trades, for lack of a better word. But that one is all around, probably be the most versatile in your loadout, just not quite as much mobility as we're going to see with these other ones. Now when we go to the Streetsweeper, we're pretty much going to use the same build that we talked about before, Agency Choke. We're going to use the Reinforced Heavy for the fire rate, which helps out. We got to go with the extra ammo just because you're going to want as much ammo as you can, so when you get those chances to reload, you'll come up top. And then you got to use the Ember Sighting Point because this increases your range by about 25%. Stacking onto the 10%, it ends up being around 30% difference when you're stacking this with the actual muzzle. So pretty straightforward there. You get that class set up, and then you end up with a stock. And you got to either go with the no stock or the marathon stock for the sprint to fire speed. If you go with the combat stock, you're going to end up with like a sprint to fire of around 300 milliseconds, which is drastically slower considering that the JAK 12 was right in at 133. So huge difference. Then for the Gallo, copy and paste to this. Pretty much we end up with the same thing for the Gallo, and you can see right here, we're going to pretty much build it out the same. It just has 12 rounds less, a little bit worse hip fire, but the reload's a little bit better. It's going to have good mobility as well, and the range is nasty with this thing, so you're going to have very consistent spread if you're using this setup. So all of them work great, and they will all serve you well. But the downside with this one is that if you're an auto attack sprint user, you're going to end up in situations where you'll want to fire and it's not going to, and that's going to cost you. So I'm kind of stepping away a little bit more from this one because of that reason. If it was full auto, this is the one I would go with. Otherwise, I'd probably go with the JAK 12. just because it's going to give a little more reliability. If you want a little bit more mobility, you go with the Streetsweeper. So pretty straightforward. Let me know down in the comment section, which one do you guys think is the best out of this bunch? If you enjoyed the video, learned something new, please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you subscribe with notifications on. Appreciate y'all supporting the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.